Fellow senators, friends, colleagues, allies, adversaries, I stand before you this morning
to defend the New Republic.
Hip hip! Boo! Hip hip! Boo! Hip hip! Boo! Hip hip!
Boo! You stink!
Most lore YouTube channels will tell you that the New Republic was an absolute failure. It won't take you much searching to find tons of different videos detailing just how bad the post-Return of the Jedi government was. And with the rise of the First Order at the beginning of The Force Awakens, I do understand why people think that, but they are wrong. The New Republic wasn't a disaster, it was an incredibly successful government that secured 30 years of unprecedented galactic peace. To understand why everyone's wrong, we need to take a look at the history of the New Republic, from the destruction of the Second Death Star all the way up to the rise of the First Order. The year is 4 ABY, the Second Death Star has fallen. The Rebel Alliance is no more, in its place stands the foundations of the New Republic. No longer are these hardy rebels facing unprecedented odds. Emperor Palpatine, who had ruled over them with an iron fist for the last 24 years, was gone. These proud, determined freedom fighters now stood as the beginnings of a fledgling government that would act as the guiding hand for the galaxy for the next 30 years. Don't get it wrong, the battle against the Empire was not won overnight. The Alliance still had to prevent Palpatine's posthumous contingency plan, Operation Cinder. They still had to defeat countless Imperial warlords who claimed the Imperial throne, and they still needed to defend against the invasion of Naboo. But with Palpatine gone, the Empire had no central figure to rally behind, and the ordinary people of the galaxy began to take up arms. Approximately a year after the conclusion of the Battle of Endor, the New Republic established their new capital, the idyllic planet of Chandrila. We have of course seen Chandrila before. For those of you that have seen Andor, you may remember Mon Mothma breaking it down on the dance floor of her homeworld. Speaking of Mothma, she logically was elected Chancellor of the New Republic, a worthy reward for her efforts both pre and post the Battle of Yavin. News of the death of the Emperor spread quickly across the galaxy, and even the last-ditch attempts from the Empire to install an actor to pretend to be Palpatine quickly failed. The general citizens knew the truth. The Empire was fading. The real lasting power that the Empire had rested with Grand Vizier Mas Amedda, Palpatine's aide since the Clone Wars, who tried to begin the impossible task of keeping up both the Empire's military and control over the galaxy. The war rumbled on. Across a number of different clashes, the New Republic was gaining ground. The leadership of the Empire could see failure on the horizon, and so high-ranking Imperials began to take action to protect themselves, fleeing to the Outer Rim or using strategically unimportant worlds as fallback positions. There were times the Empire successfully fought back, such as the Liberation Day attacks on Chandrila, but overall momentum was with the New Republic as people across the galaxy stood up to fight. It was during this time period that the New Republic, and specifically Chancellor Mothma, introduced the Committee for Imperial Reallocation. This was aimed with redistributing the wealth and resources of the Empire throughout the galaxy. Policies like this are the first reason I believe that the New Republic was a success. They could quite easily have used the wealth and resources to further infrastructure on key worlds, such as Chandrila or later on Coruscant, but they instead divided this wealth amongst the most badly affected planets in order to try and develop the galaxy as a whole. No other government in the history of the galaxy attempted to devise such a system of wealth distribution. The war between the Imperial remnants and the New Republic finally came to a head at the Battle of Jakku. The brutal fight was all part of Palpatine's grand contingency plan, a battle to destroy both the Empire and the New Republic in the event of his death. Initially, due to unconventional tactics, the Empire took a hold of the battle. But the New Republic was decisive, and through tactics and sheer willpower, they sent the Super Star Destroyer, Ravager, crashing to the surface of Jakku, shifting the tide of battle. As the New Republic battled in space and on land, the remaining Imperial commanders fled into the unknown regions once they could sense the war was lost. Grand Vizier Amedda had seen enough. Emerging from hiding, he announced his intention to arrange a ceasefire between the two sides. With that announcement, the Galactic Concordance was signed, and the Empire surrendered. A new era had begun. The Empire had been mostly purged from the galaxy, bar a few rogue Imperials still remaining in the Outer Rim and the Unknown regions, and so the New Republic could get to work on ensuring a long-term peace lasted in the galaxy. The first act of going about this was the passing of Mon Mothma's Military Disarmament Act, which is one of the main factors that people attribute to the ultimate failure of the New Republic. And look, I get it. In hindsight, it was a pretty poor decision to rapidly demilitarize now that we know that the Shadow Council of Imperials was working on the return of Grand Admiral Thrawn and that the First Order was on the horizon. But at the time, the Imperial remnants were seen as little to no threat, and at the heart of it, this was Mothma's idealistic gamble for peace after the decades of fascism that had come before. The Military Disarmament Act also put the initiative regarding defence back into the hands of local planetary defence forces, allowing systems to decide amongst themselves how they would allocate their resources. Yes, this may have ultimately led to the downfall of the New Republic, but should the overall government really be to blame for the fact that the individual worlds didn't do enough to strengthen their own defences? One thing I absolutely will say detracts from the success of the New Republic was their blind faith that the Empire was gone when the signs did begin to show. In 9 ABY, when the New Republic pilot Carson Taver ventured to the core worlds to explain his suspicions regarding the activity of the remnants, the leadership of the New Republic turned a blind eye. Actions like this are ultimately the reason that the New Republic failed, but again, I don't think we should get carried away. The New Republic still lasted another 25 years. They must have been doing something right. The New Republic's next major success was the New Republic Amnesty program, which allowed former Imperials to move to Coruscant to aid the New Republic in exchange for amnesty. The government clearly aimed to bring shunned Imperials back into the fold rather than drive them away to the subversion of the Imperial warlords. This policy, while not directly preventing the development of the warlords' schemes, would have had a significant impact. You must acknowledge, with the Imperials losing bright minds such as Dr. Pen Pershing to the New Republic, this policy would have ultimately slowed work on things like Project Necromancer, even if the Republic at the time weren't aware of its existence. Now, we do have the small issue of Thrawn to contend with. At the time of recording, Ahsoka Season 2 isn't out, and so we don't know exactly how the New Republic dealt with this threat. What we do know is that all the files related to this conflict were strictly classified, and that whatever happened during this period didn't change the New Republic's approach to governing. Based on these facts, we can only assume that the New Republic felt appropriately geared up to deal with another significant threat in the same vein as Thrawn, and so the demilitarization strategies continued throughout the next 20 years. It was during this period that the New Republic began rotating their capital. This was also another key success in my eyes. Imagine if in the country you lived in, the capital city rotated every few years. Think of the economic prosperity and the urban development that will be spread across your nation. Worlds like Chandrilla, Nakadia, and Hosnian Prime were thrown into the spotlight that previously would never have had a chance to be the seat of galactic power. The decentralization of power was so crucial to the success of the New Republic, and it was very important in ensuring that the corruption that had previously plagued the Galactic Republic didn't return. For now. An entire generation grew up under the New Republic, knowing only peace and prosperity in the galaxy. The Empire, the Galactic Civil War, these were all myths to them, stories of a bygone era. To be really honest, details on this period are a little sparse. We haven't really had too much content set between Ahsoka and the beginning of the rise of the First Order. At the moment, we have to assume that this is a relatively peaceful and prosperous time. Maybe in a few years, once this gap has been filled in by some books or by TV shows or films, my entire view of the New Republic will change. The leadership of the New Republic continued even without Mothma, as new chancellors were elected, although most would say that the following leaders lacked the charisma and charm that she brought to government, which would eventually kickstart the beginning of the end. With a lack of strong leadership in the Senate, two powerful factions emerged. The Centrists believed that the New Republic should rebuild its military and take a stronger hold over galactic governance. On the opposite side sat the Populists, who, like Mothma before, believed that the individual worlds should retain most autonomy. The two sides constantly battled for control of the Senate, and between these two factions, the New Republic ground to a halt. They lost their ability to enforce financial regulations. They could no longer organise regular patrols of galactic shipping lanes. Threats began to rise throughout the galaxy, with powerful cartels posing serious threat to significant worlds. And of course, waiting in the wings was the First Order. Rising from a mysterious Imperial remnant, the First Order used the cartels in order to build their navy and resources to prepare for war. With political deadlock still facing the Senate, and the weak Chancellor Vilecham refusing to consider the First Order as a serious threat, some centrist senators began secretly supporting the First Order, using their power to block motions to develop the Republic Navy. Once the New Republic had got to this point, it was as good as dead. Corruption infested the legislative body, and the days of the New Republic were numbered. And so we reached the year 34 ABY. The New Republic fell with the destruction of Hosnian Prime. Starkiller Base's deadly superweapon killed billions, ripping sub-hyperspace and igniting a new galactic war. With only Leia's resistance fighters left to combat the First Order, the era of the New Republic had officially ended. While the end of the story of the New Republic is embroiled in corruption and political stalemates that led to its demise, can we really sit here and dismiss the entire government as a complete failure? I don't think we can. And to understand why, we have to stop measuring the success of a government solely by how it ended and start looking at what it achieved while it was here. You need to think about the monumental task that Mon Mothma and her inner circle faced. How do you go about managing a galaxy after 24 years of authoritarian leadership built entirely on naval supremacy and fear? The Empire didn't just rule, it hollowed out the galaxy's economy, it enslaved entire species, and it stripped worlds of their local autonomy. If the New Republic had immediately built a massive centralized military to police the galaxy, they wouldn't have been a republic, it would have just been the Empire under a different flag. The wealth distribution policies, the rotating capital, the peace-first agenda, these weren't signs of weakness. They were a deliberate, radical rejection of Palpatine's tyranny. The New Republic took the only moral path it could to ensure one thing returned to the galaxy: genuine liberty. We also need to look at the historical context. We love to praise the Galactic Republic, but that government allowed Sith to infiltrate its highest officers, it completely ignored a massive corporate slave trade in the Outer Rim, and it collapsed into a galactic civil war after a millennium of slow decay. The New Republic, despite being built from the ashes of a shattered galaxy, managed to secure 3 decades of uninterrupted, unprecedented galactic peace. An entire generation grew up never knowing the fear of a Star Destroyer looming in their skies. They grew up without the oppression of stormtroopers on their streets. For 30 years, trade flourished, culture rebuilt itself, and the galaxy breathed. The tragedy of the New Republic is that their greatest virtue, their absolute dedication to peace, became their fatal flaw. But the New Republic was not a disaster. It proved that even after decades of darkness, the galaxy could still choose hope over fear and cooperation over tyranny. It didn't last forever, but then nothing in this galaxy ever does. What matters is that for 30 years, they got it right.